During Transfiguration, after a brief discussion of animagi, Professor Edward began the formal lesson. He lectured for half the period, then waved his wand and handed out matches to every student, instructing them to practice turning the matches into needles. By the end of the morning, only a handful of students had managed even a partial transfiguration. Professor Edward was not surprised. Transfiguration was widely considered the most difficult subject, and a few partial successes already exceeded his expectations. He assigned homework, dismissed the class, and let the first years go. The first year schedule was light: Transfiguration in the morning, Charms and Herbology in the afternoon. Charms was taught by Luke, who had once been the mayor of Hogsmeade. Unlike the power-hungry mayor of Bree City, Luke had no desire to cling to authority. He had prepared a successor, and once the successor was approved by Dewey, he handed over most administrative duties and devoted himself to the study of magic. That decision stunned his old rival, Ratch, who could only rue that he had been outmatched. Freed from civic burdens, Luke's talent in charms blossomed. He grew to surpass many of his peers and eventually applied for and won the charms professorship. He also served as dean of Thunderbird House. Luke taught with a light, humorous touch and kept the classroom relaxed. He favored demonstrations and theatrics to make dry theory stick, and the students watched spellwork with rapt attention. Even after the bell, they lingered, excitedly comparing the charms they'd just seen. When charms ended, the students hurried downstairs and left the castle for Greenhouse 1, which sits just beyond the hedge that encloses Dewey and Arwen's private garden. Dewey had ordered a tall, thick living wall planted around the garden when the school was founded. Magical growth charms had made the hedge dense and impassable. The garden contained two sacred trees, the white tree and the malong tree, and many fragile, rare specimens, so only Dewey, Arwen, or those they specifically permitted could enter. Outside that hedge, 7 glass greenhouses stood in a row, numbered 1 through 7. The higher the number, the rarer or more dangerous the plants within. The original herbology garden inside Amon Sul Tower had become Dewey's private medicinal garden and was no longer part of the public greenhouses. All the greenhouses were overseen by Professor Margalis. She had been one of the first graduates of the Magic Crash Course and attracted Dewey's attention for her extraordinary talent in herbology. After graduating, she remained at the castle to tend Dewey's private medicinal garden and manage the public greenhouses. Over the past decade, her research and skill had advanced rapidly. She had cultivated many wonderful magical plants and traveled to remote places: Mirkwood, Fangorn, the Old Forest. Her travels had earned her the friendship of Radagast the Brown, the Wood Elves, and even the Ents, from whom she received many rare seeds. She brought them home and planted them in the greenhouses. She'd even transplanted a Huorn willow from Fangorn into Greenhouse 7. Dewey had been astonished and delighted, and when the herbology professorship opened, he recommended Margales without hesitation. Margales herself was plump and cheerful, brown-haired with bright blue eyes and an almost perpetual smile. She wore a dirt-stained brown dress and a dust-gray hat, a practical look for someone who lived among soil and sap. She seemed gentle and approachable, but her ambitions were vast. She dreamed of turning Weathertop into a forest of white trees and Maolong trees, rivaling the golden wood of Lothlorien in beauty. She also hoped to help the Ents. Since the disappearance of the Ontwives, the Ents had lost their ability to reproduce. Margals was experimenting with magical methods to cultivate Ent saplings and restore the possibility of Ent propagation. Dewey supported her wholeheartedly. The friendship of the Ents would be priceless. By the time the Phoenix and Dragon House first years arrived at Greenhouse 1, Professor Margals was already waiting. The greenhouse had been expanded with undetectable extension charms. Inside it was as large as a football field, and constant temperature charms kept the environment stable. Because it's the first-year classroom, Greenhouse 1 held mostly safe, non-threatening magical plants. The dominant crop was an enormous patch of Dittany, Margals' pride, and the focus of the students' first herbology lesson. Dittany was famed for its healing properties. Its sap could be refined into Dittany essence, which mended most wounds. Many wizarding households kept Dittany essence in their medicine cabinets, but Margals' yields were in a different league. She produced so much dittany that the essence she distilled was sold in Diagon Alley and exported far beyond, fetching high prices. Though she could have been an invisible agricultural tycoon, Margal's devotion was to study and cultivation rather than wealth. She also applied herbology to practical combat. On an expedition to Mirkwood, she had brought back a dark mutated vine known as the Killer Vine, an aggressive plant twisted by corrupting powers, and used its traits to breed new strains of Devil's Snare. Devil's Snare thrived in dark, damp places and trapped victims in constricting tendrils until they suffocated. Its known weakness was light and fire, which caused it to recoil. Margales deliberately left that weakness in most of her specimens as a safety measure so they would not become uncontrollable. She did, however, succeed in cultivating one exceptional specimen, a particularly hardy, controlled Devil's Snare, whose vines were unusually tough and resistant to ordinary light and flame. She kept that plant under strict containment as a last resort defensive tool. Margal's Devil's Snare was unlike anything the students had seen before. Its tendrils were as hard as steel wire, ordinary knives and swords could not cut them, and it possessed a vitality so great that it could survive for long periods without rooting in soil. Fed with water or nutrients, it could endure even longer. Most frightening of all, it was a blood-sucking vine. Its sharp thorns could pierce an enemy and then ravenously drain blood to strengthen itself. The more powerful the victim it fed on, the faster and more potent the Devil's Snare became. Margals had tamed this creature. Normally, it shrank down to fit inside a hollow bracelet she wore. When danger approached, it would unfurl like a giant net of vines, protecting its mistress while lashing out at attackers. With such a guardian at her side, Margals, who spent much of her time in herbology, commanded a real and not to be underestimated power. After the greenhouse session, the mud-splattered students filed out, returned to their dorms to wash and change, and called the day's classes over. The next morning, the Phoenix House pupils attended Defense Against the Dark Arts with their classmates from Basilisk House. The class belonged to Brog, leader of the Black Barbarians. Brog was a rare talent in both dark arts and defense, one of the strongest wizards serving under Duir. He possessed animagus forms of a falcon and a giant eagle, and having merged his bloodline with that of a frost dragon, he wielded near absolute control over ice. He had developed the freezing charm, originally a common life magic, into a far more advanced, formidable spell. A wave of his wand could freeze objects instantly. Even incoming spells could be stopped in their tracks. After defense, the students returned to the greenhouse for herbology with Dragon House. In the afternoon, they shared History of Magic with Thunderbird House. That day, 2 elven ladies arrived together, and their appearance turned the lecture into something close to a spectacle. Lady Evenstar was luminous and gentle, a star among stars, mysterious, elegant, and radiating a maternal glow in her pregnancy. Lady Galadriel, taller and equally beautiful, carried the serene brightness of the moon. Her deep, penetrating gaze was gentle yet impossible to meet directly. Arwen taught the course, with Galadriel serving as her teaching assistant. Their clear, graceful voices transformed ancient history from dry dates and facts into a vivid tapestry. Galadriel had herself lived through many of the events they spoke of. When she narrated, her presence, imbued with a kind of spiritual will, made students feel as if they had stepped back in time, witnesses to the great deeds of old. Only when the bell finally rang did everyone return to the present, their minds buzzing with the images and stories they had been shown. By the third day, the Phoenix students had herbology in the morning, defense against the dark arts, and history of magic in the afternoon, and astronomy in the evening. Thursday brought the event everyone had been waiting for, flying class. No one could resist the lure of flight, not the young wizards, not even the house elves. The broom was the quintessential wizarding flying tool, and since Quidditch had spread from the castle, its popularity had only grown. Professor Gandalf ran flying class. Though he looked ancient, he was remarkably nimble and an exceptional flyer. His lessons were informal and hands-on. After demonstrating techniques, he had the students mount their brooms and take to the air. Most had only ever ridden toy brooms that hovered a meter above the ground. When more than 50 students climbed onto real brooms, the sky above the castle erupted into chaos. Some shot upwards like rockets, shrieking. Some crashed into the city wall. Others plummeted toward the ground. It was pandemonium. Gandalf, however, moved through the chaos with astonishing speed. Time and again, he snatched wildly careening students out of the air with a single hand, saving them from broken necks as if they were human-shaped quaffles. Gandalf's skill was not only in broom technique, but in Quidditch as well. Calmed by his presence, the students began to gain control, buoyed by the knowledge that their professor would protect them no matter what. Freed from fear, they played hard and tested the limits, screams and cheers echoing over the castle until nightfall. Dewey watched from the tower window, clicking his tongue. The method taught flying fast, certainly, though perhaps only Gandalf had the stamina to manage so many beginners at once. And the professor's delight in the lesson was plain to see. Before they knew it, the second week had arrived. The students settled into routine quicker now. Lessons proceeded more systematically. The moving staircases, talking portraits, patrolling suits of armor, vast library, flying spellbooks, self-writing quills, and the thunderbird that stirred storms to clear and water the grounds. These wonders tugged at the students' curiosity and made them eager to explore the castle beyond class. On the weekend of the second week, a livelier kind of activity began. Gandalf, who taught flying and served as Quidditch referee, officially formed Quidditch teams for the four houses. Almost everyone signed up, and even the house elves wanted to join. A team consisted of 7 players, 1 keeper, 2 beaters, 3 chasers, and 1 seeker. Dewey sponsored a golden snitch he had personally crafted for the matches, and he rewrote some rules to emphasize teamwork, fairness, and spectator enjoyment. Among his changes, Dewey reduced the snitch's value from 150 points to 50. Catching the snitch could no longer automatically end a match unless the base score difference between the teams, before the snitch was caught, was greater than 50 points. He also imposed a match time limit of 120 minutes. If the time limit was reached, the side holding the golden snitch at that moment would win immediately. If the snitch had not been captured, the team with the higher total score would be declared the victor. Dewey wanted to avoid the long, tactical delays and interminable matches he had heard about. One recorded match in the Harry Potter world had lasted 3 months, and he certainly didn't want Quidditch to become a seeker's solo showcase. With teams formed in all 4 houses, the first campus Quidditch match slowly drew to a start. First-year Quidditch at Hogwarts was lively but, by necessity, chaotic. More a free-for-all than a polished spectacle. Dewey had just come down from the stands after watching the match between Phoenix House and Basilisk House and thought quietly that as the school's population grew, the level of play might eventually become more enjoyable to watch. Even so, there were already standout players, the elven children whose natural agility and fitness made them shine on broomsticks. Each house tended to put their elven players in the seeker position, hoping one of them would snatch the golden snitch worth 50 points and tip the match in their favor. When every house's seeker was an elf, though, catching the snitch became a far trickier business. Phoenix House's seeker was Aranir, a Sindar from Rivendell. His 2 roommates were on the team as well. Onlemere, a Dunedain, served as a beater, and Adam Bailey, who lived in Hogsmeade, was keeper and captain. Adam could not match his roommates for raw athleticism, but he knew Quidditch inside out and had a knack for organization and tactics, which made him a natural leader. Basilisk House's seeker in that opening match was a Noldor from Lothlorien. Dragon House's was a Sylvan from Mirkwood. Thunderbird House's a Teleri from the Grey Havens. The matches between the 4 houses had become less a simple competition of points and more an informal contest among elven peoples, pride and rivalry as much as sport, and they drew attention across elven communities as a friendly way to measure skill. Traditionally, the seeker role almost always went to an elf. Even though Dewey had taken measures that diminished the seeker's absolute dominance on a team, the position remained crucial. A single snitch catch could swing a 50-point lead or end the game once a decisive advantage was secure. Over time, exceptionally talented young wizards whose flying surpassed even the elves did sometimes become seekers, go on to professional Quidditch careers, and earn renown beyond Hogwarts. The school's Quidditch season ran on a round-robin schedule, with matches once a month. By the time every house had played, it was already May of 2962. The end of term brought official exam review week, and before that, a week-long New Year holiday. Because the break coincided with the Hobbit Yule, the Hobbit calendar's marker of the end of one year and the start of the next, celebrated as a 6-day festival, the holiday at Hogwarts had come to be known simply as Yule. Students went home during Yule, reuniting with family, showing off the magic they had learned, and spreading Hogwarts' reputation across Middle-earth. Many children began to dream of receiving an acceptance from this strange, distant school, and their parents hoped for the same. One such parent had been King Thengel of Rohan, who had a friendly relationship with Dewey. He wrote, on behalf of his only son Theoden, born 2948, now 13, asking if the boy might study at Hogwarts. Theoden, however, was an ordinary human without any apparent magical talent, and Dewey had to decline politely and explain why. By June, first-year students had finished a week of grueling final exams and could finally relax. At the year-end feast, the Great Hall blazed with candlelight, and the ceiling mirrored a clear, starlit sky. The 4 house tables sagged under sumptuous dishes, while the teachers occupied the head table. After almost a year together, the staff had grown familiar with one another. Dewey sat at the center, attentive to his heavily pregnant wife, Arwen. The sight of him leaning over her had become a common one. Professor Luke of Charms, Professor Brogg of Defense Against the Dark Arts, and Professor Edward of Transfiguration discussed magical theory. Professor Margales of Herbology sat laughing with Madame Amanda from the infirmary. Professor Ellensis of Potions and Professor Alpha of Astronomy exchanged quiet comments over their plates. Gandalf and Lady Galadriel chatted together, and Galadriel's laughter rang out like music. The scene below captivated the students. When the tables were cleared, Dewey rose. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the hall as he announced the house totals. Overall, he was pleased. The students had acquitted themselves well during the year, with few disciplinary problems and steady achievement in their studies. The differences in house points came down to day-to-day efforts more than to scandal or misconduct. In the end, Phoenix House edged out the others to claim this year's House Cup. Along with the honor, Dewey awarded a modest prize of 100 galleons to the winning house. It thrilled the Phoenix students, who cheered uproariously. The other houses watched with envy and resolved to try harder next year. Professor Edward, Dean of Phoenix, allowed himself a rare smile and accepted the congratulations with more warmth than usual. Dewey waved his hand, and the Great Hall's decorations shifted to Phoenix House's colors, a soaring golden-red phoenix embroidered everywhere. Those banners would remain until another house won the cup and replaced them with its own emblem. Gandalf stood in the Great Hall, watching the room fill with laughter and the bright chaos of children, and his smile never left his face. Beside him, Galadriel had been drawn into the same warmth. A gentle radiance softened the air around her. He turned to her and said happily, "This is wonderful, isn't it, my lady?" Galadriel returned his smile, the light in her eyes growing tender. "I have seen many beautiful things," she said, "but there is a joy here that is entirely different, so light, so full of life. Not even the Blessed Realm could rival this moment." She looked at Gandalf with a hint of amusement. "So this is why you linger at Hogwarts, Mithrandir. A wanderer like you, who cannot be held by Rivendell or Lothlorien, chooses to remain here. That does surprise me." Gandalf chuckled and watched the children below, their laughter spilling like music. "They are the future," he said softly. "I see boundless potential in them. If there is anything Duir has done that truly earns my admiration, it is not the marvels he invents, but that he founded this school and brought these children to it." He thought of how magic, taught to wizards, Dunedain, and elves, would spread through a new generation. Once trained, they could stand as a powerful bulwark against encroaching darkness. "I have seen visions of a glorious age of magic," he added with quiet conviction. "If these children grow, even Sauron and his legions will not be the terror they once were." Galadriel nodded, the wisdom in her gaze flickering as though she too had glimpsed such a future. Then a crease of concern appeared between her brows. "Yet we must guard their minds," she said solemnly. Sauron's power has always been corruption, words that twist and seduce. Hogwarts will draw his attention as it grows. We cannot give him a foothold among these children. None of them must be led into the dark. Gandalf met her eyes. Your fear is well-founded. That is another reason I chose to remain. Narya can help protect the castle from shadow, and I trust Duir. He has planned more than we see. Following his gaze, Galadriel watched Duir nearby, tending to Arwen. He held a golden chalice of milk and gently urged his wife to drink. The look on Galadriel's face softened. Arwen had been carrying children for more than 2 years now. Elven gestation runs long, and the twins were expected around the next term in March. Her belly was large, yet she moved with the light grace of an elf. Every step, however cautious, made Duir more anxious. Under his insistence, Arwen had agreed not to teach the coming term and had handed her classes to her mother, Galadriel. Elven pregnancy drew on both the mother's physical strength and the wellspring of her magic. With twins, the strain was greater still. Elrond had stocked remedies and fortifying draughts well in advance, and Madame Amanda, a specialist in healing magic, kept watch in the castle day and night. Duir had gone further. He sent to distant places for rare meat and delicacies, called on Lothlorien's finest cooks at Galadriel's request, and set the golden cup, enchanted for restoration and nourishment, into daily use. He filled it with Ent beverage and a raw cattle milk, rich with vitality. With such care, Arwen had experienced little more than a sense of fullness and a few ordinary discomforts. When the end-of-year feast came to its close, the school year officially ended. The following morning, the students departed in waves, carriages down to Hogsmeade, and families waiting with anxious delight. Children who had not seen their parents for some time clambered out and flung themselves into waiting arms. Some went home through the flue fireplaces. Every household connected to the network made that simple. Others preferred the night bus, which would take you anywhere with an address, even beyond the flue's reach. Adam Bailey and those who lived in Hogsmeade walked the familiar lanes and saved their flue powder. Some students dashed into Diagon Alley for sweets and games before reluctantly returning to parents less pleased with late nights. After the last trunks were taken, Hogwarts became quiet. Professors dispersed for the summer. Even Gandalf mounted Shadowfax and rode out to wander until term began again. Duir found the sudden hush unnerving. He refocused all his attention on Arwen. This late stage of pregnancy demanded nothing less. Far away in Mordor, within the black silhouette of Barad-dûr, a white-robed figure drifted into the tower, bowing before the Dark Lord. "Master," the apparition intoned, kneeling. "What are your commands?" Sauron's red eyes flashed with satisfaction. He assigned his servant 3 tasks. "Saruman," he said, "you shall have your chance for vengeance. Infiltrate the school at Hogwarts. First, learn the whereabouts of the One Ring. Even if it is not in Duir's hands, it is connected to him. Second, seize any opportunity to obtain the Philosopher's Stone. With it, a body can be remade. If you possess it, you may be resurrected and regain strength. Third, I will grant you a ring of power. Use it to corrupt and mislead these wizards, especially the young ones. Make Duir suffer the sting of betrayal by those he has raised." At the sound of Duir's name, the white-robed figure, Saruman, bared malice. Though now utterly under Sauron's dominion, he remembered being defeated by Duir and still burned with hatred. Yet he raised a hesitant voice. "Master, Hogwarts is his stronghold. Protections woven into the place and Duir's own might are formidable. If I approach, I will be found." Sauron waved a hand and cut him off. "You need not fear. I have devised a way so that even if you stand before him, you will not be detected." Saruman's spectral form stirred. "What way is that, Master?" Sauron's gaze turned west, his thoughts calculating and cold. "Duir founded a school to train children born with magic. They have only just gone home and will return in 2 months when term resumes. Find one of those children, possess them, disguise yourself as a student, and enter the castle." In July, countless great snowy owls streamed out of the castle, scattering across Middle-earth. Along with the standard lists of supplies for returning students, they carried the long-awaited acceptance letters for the new entrants of the coming school year. Under the eager eyes of children throughout the land, the snow-white birds, messengers of fortune, delivered those precious envelopes. This year's intake was even larger than the last. Among the accepted were not only young wizards from Duir's territory, elves from various realms, and the northern Dunedain, but also a few children of the southern Dunedain living in Gondor. The nobles of Gondor, like the northern Dunedain, were descended from the old Númenóreans. Over generations of intermarriage with other races, their blood had become diluted and their lifespans shortened to something more like ordinary folk. Occasionally, however, a child's Númenórean heritage would briefly revert to its ancestral vigor. Such was the case with some of those who received Hogwarts letters. Having shown magical talent, they were recorded by the accepting quill and entered into the Book of Admissions. Regent Ecthelion II of Gondor was delighted that children from his own land had been accepted. He received the families personally. He had known for some time that Hogwarts recruited students to study magic. His regret was that his elder son, Denethor Sect, was already grown and thus too old to enroll. As descendants of Númenor, Ecthelion's line was second only to the royal family. Though their lives had been shortened over time, some ancestral abilities remained. Both Boromir and Faramir, Denethor's sons, possessed glimpses of foresight in the form of premonitory dreams, visions connected vaguely to the One Ring before the War of the Ring. Denethor himself had some magical aptitude. He had even visited a wand shop in Diagon Alley and bought a wand and whatever magic books he could find. Ecthelion had been more extravagant. He hired a wizard who had completed the magic crash course to give Denethor private lessons. Denethor learned enough to claim a working, if rudimentary, knowledge of magic, just the sort of thing one might call ordinary wizardry. If he wished to go deeper, there was only one route: Hogwarts. But Denethor was content. Magic was a pastime to him. His real education was in governing a realm, one day to inherit the regency. By August, families from distant places all used the portkey attached to the acceptance letters to reach Diagon Alley and buy school supplies. Returning students, now in their second year, sensibly avoided the crush of new students. They either met classmates or came with parents earlier to buy second-year textbooks and equipment. August passed in a bustle, and soon September 1st arrived. New and returning students gathered in Hogsmeade. After farewells, the carriages filled, and the procession across the bridge toward the castle began. Seeing the first years, the older students were reminded of themselves and, feeling like seniors, made a point of helping the nervous, awkward freshmen. Bathed in the late sun, the coaches passed in orderly lines and came to a halt before the main gate. First years, this way, Deputy Headmaster Edward called, waiting on the path. The bewildered newcomers followed his voice, gathering and moving as instructed. The second years, upon spotting Professor Edward, hurried obediently into the great hall. No one wanted to draw the dean's attention. "That nearly gave me a heart attack. Edward's solemn face is terrifying," Adam Bailey exclaimed, flopping down onto a bench in Phoenix House. His roommate, Aranir the Elf, and their other friend, Anlamir the Dunedain, laughed at his dramatic relief. "Professor Edward is strict, but he needn't scare you that much," Anlamir said, amusement in his voice. Adam sagged over the table. "Your transfiguration marks are excellent, so you don't have to fear him. I only got an A, acceptable, in transfiguration last term. How can I not be frightened?" It wasn't just that Edward was strict, he was the head of their house. For a student who just scraped by in Professor Edward's subject, it felt a lot like a failing pupil meeting his form tutor. Adam wasn't a bad student overall. Apart from transfiguration, his grades were either O for outstanding or E for exceeds expectations. But his transfiguration performance was infamous. In the final exam last semester, when asked to turn a mouse into a snuff box, Adam had succeeded, only the transformation had gone too far. The mouse became a beautiful snuff box, while everything nearby reverted into mice. The result was a small plague of mice in Professor Edward's office. Most were recaptured and restored, but some scampered out and terrified students lining up outside. A few vanished into unknown holes. A shoe, a teacup, and a pocket watch were never recovered. Edward's displeasure had landed Adam a conspicuously heavy-marked A on his report, an anecdote that quickly became school lore. The second years took their places in the great hall as the professors filed in. When the doors finally closed, Professor Edward led the first years forward in two neat lines. like ducklings following their mother, and into the hall. The newcomers looked around with a mix of awe and nerves. The staff and returning students watched as the sorting ceremony began. There were more new students this year than last, 124 in all. After the sorting hat finished a new song, each first year was called, and cheers rose from the houses whenever one of their own was placed with them. With the sorting complete, Dewey stood and briefly explained the school rules before declaring the feast open. He kept one hand on Arwen's, who sat beside him. She was 6 months gone now, and Dewey's attention was naturally divided as the time of the birth drew nearer. As he leaned toward her, his concentration broke. A sharp, hostile gaze prickled at the edge of his awareness. He turned his head to follow it, but where he looked, there were only students, oblivious. The feeling of malice evaporated as suddenly as it had appeared, as if it had never been there at all. "What's wrong, Dewey?" Arwen asked, noticing the furrow between his brows. She reached out when she saw his uneasy look, concern softening her voice. When Dewey met his wife's anxious gaze and saw her swollen belly, the tension in his face eased. He gave a careless shake of the head and a grin. "Nothing. I just have the feeling someone's sneaking a peek at me, probably a little admirer." Arwen rolled her eyes at her vain husband, then amusedly set a slab of his favorite dragon steak on his plate. "Thank you, dear," he said, smiling as he bent over his food. Under the table, though, he quietly let his legitimacy flow. As soon as he opened himself, a welter of childish thoughts poured in, noisy, bright, and jumbled, so loud they almost hurt. He kept chewing, face polite, while his mind focused like a blade, picking up and sorting the jumble of impressions from every student. Stray fears, excitement, hunger, petty rivalries. He listened for anything out of the ordinary, for the faintest wrinkle in the connection each child had with the castle. The great hall was full of chatter and singing. The students' thoughts were many times louder than their words. After a careful sweep, Dewey drew back. There was nothing unusual, only the ordinary hum of a school full of young magic. He relaxed, but the deep seriousness in his eyes remained. When everyone had eaten, Dewey rose and flicked his wand. A ribbon of glittering words shot into the air, hanging between chandeliers. "Now, everyone, sing the school song in whatever tune you like," he announced. "Ready? Sing!" The professors exchanged expressions, some amused, some mildly alarmed, and the students obliged. The great hall erupted in 1,000 different melodies. The older second years, veterans of such chaos, sang at the tops of their lungs as if competing for volume, drowning out everyone else. Chaotic tunes tangled and danced through the hall. The portraits and statues seemed to wince and cover their ears. A few professors had already muttered the muffliato charm to dampen the racket. As the song went on, something invisible formed, a soft, steady link between the castle and each student. With every note, the connection deepened. The students' emotional energy and overflow of magic flowed toward a single point within the castle. Dewey watched over it, his wand tracing lines only he could feel. Being the castle's master, he could sense how each child's bond both protected and restrained them, an ever-present supervision so they would not harm home or halls. He examined the pattern carefully, found it normal, and relaxed. Then the air changed. A violent pulse of magic shuddered through the castle. The stones hummed. Even the hall's ceiling seemed to thrumming with power. Outside, the thunderbirds that nested in the malong tree screamed, tearing free from their roosts in crackling flashes of electric light, and circled the keep. The enchanted sky above the chandeliers swelled with storm clouds, lightning slashing across it. Ozone stung the air. Down below, somewhere in the caverns beneath the castle, the great dragon Smog raised his head and bellowed a roar that rattled plates. "Was that an earthquake?" someone shouted. "I thought I heard a dragon," another cried. Panic fluttered through the students and even the staff. Gandalf and Galadriel kept their composure, but surprise softened their faces. Dewey slammed his hand on the table until the room fell into a hush. His voice rolled like thunder. "Quiet." Professor Edward looked at him with wide eyes. "Principal, what happened?" Dewey's own features had a flicker of both surprise and delight, and he smiled, calming. "Don't be alarmed. That was only a small disturbance, and a very welcome one. We have a new companion who is eager to meet you all." "A companion?" Murmurs rippled through the hall. teeth-gnashing curiosity playing on many faces. Dewey raised his wand. "Everyone, please raise your wands." Despite their confusion, the students obeyed. The professors did the same. Dewey sent out a silver thread from his wand that pierced the ceiling's storm clouds. The clouds answered, taking on a quick silver glow as if drawn by an invisible force. From every raised wand, slender filaments of light reached up and joined the thread, forming a web of silver that drew toward the clouds. Gasps spread across the hall, especially from first years who had never even learned to perform formal magic, but found, without understanding how, that their hands could make light. Gandalf and Galadriel lifted theirs as well. Unseen to most, rings on their fingers flashed, pouring further power into the weave. The clouds shivered and condensed, silver coalescing into a shape. When the light cleared, a figure hung in the air, more solid than a ghost, more ethereal than a person. Short, roughly the stature of a hobbit, with a wide face, round, bright eyes, a mop of black hair, and pale skin, he wore a patchwork of brightly colored clothes, a narrow tie, a pointed nightcap, and curling jester's shoes. His round black eyes darted about with restless mischief. He gave a peculiar cry and dove into the crowd, streaking over heads. Students let out startled yelps and crouched. The newcomer snatched hats and caps and tossed them up in the air, chortling. Laughter, strange and high, cut through the hall as he zipped between tables, a blur of energy and impish joy. "What is that? A ghost?" a first-year demanded, clutching his cap. Dewey let out a single, thunderous command that stopped the figure mid-tumble. "All right, Peeves, no more mischief." The little entity froze, then floated up in front of Dewey, studying him with bright, inquisitive eyes. He cocked his head. "Peeves, is that my name?" Before anyone could answer, he bounced in the air, delighted. "Ha-ha, Peeves, I like it. From now on, I'll be the great Mr. Peeves." Students and professors stared in astonishment at the creature bouncing in midair, whom Principal Dewey had named Peeves. "Principal, what exactly is that? It looks like a ghost, but it isn't one," Vice Principal Edward asked Dewey, bafflement plain on his face. The other teachers and the students also turned to the principal, hoping he could explain. Dewey did not answer at once. Instead, he smiled and addressed Gandalf and Galadriel. "Gandalf, Lady Galadriel, you are both learned and wise. You must have an understanding of Peeves. Could you tell everyone what he is?" Gandalf glanced toward Galadriel and deferred to her. Galadriel, her eyes bright with quiet light, regarded the airborne mischief-maker with interest. "All things in this world, shaped and tended by time, can give rise to spirits of nature," she said. "Old forests, rivers, mountains, each may nurture a spirit. This Peeves is the spirit born of this castle." A ripple of comprehension spread through the crowd and then deepened into new questions. "Lady Galadriel, but this castle is only a little over a decade old," Professor Edward protested. "How could a spirit have been born so quickly?" Galadriel turned a smile upon Dewey. "Thanks to your castle, Principal. Things that normally take millennia to form a spirit have been accelerated here, because every brick and stone is suffused with magic. That changes the rules of time. It is not surprising that a spirit should arise." Gandalf nodded. "And if the castle is the cradle, then the children's laughter and boundless energy are the nourishment. Peeves is, in a sense, an elf born between the castle and its children." The assembled folks stared at Peeves with new respect and a good deal of alarm. If he was the castle spirit, then within the walls he held sway. And if the spirit had been spawned here, no one except the castle lord, Dewey himself, might have any real authority over him. Watching Peeves bounce, scatter floating candles, and flick hot wax at the students with a wicked grin, the professors felt their nerves twitch. As castle spirit, he was not a harmless presence. Too lively, too mischievous, exactly the sort of trouble Vice Principal Edward feared. To him, Peeves looked less like a guardian and more like a perpetually unruly child destined to make life chaotic. Dewey listened, somewhat rueful. He realized in hindsight that his own imagination had played a part in Peeves' form. In catalyzing the spirit's birth, he had inadvertently imprinted an image he remembered, Peeves's look and temperament, into the nascent spirit. If he had controlled his mind during the ritual, perhaps a steadier, more obedient ghost butler might have emerged. But the moment was past. Peeves' nature was fixed. As long as the castle remained occupied, students' emotions would continue to nourish him, and he would grow stronger. He could pass through walls, ignore physical attacks, fly anywhere inside the castle, and even touch and throw things, unlike a true ghost. Ordinary magic was largely ineffective against him. At best, the dark arts could restrict his movement temporarily. The one sure limit was location. Peeves could not leave the castle. Dewey let the other teachers shepherd the students out of the Great Hall. The four deans led the first years to their common rooms, while the chatter following Peeves' antics buzzed behind them. Dewey spent a moment watching the spirit dart off to explore the castle, then helped Arwen and, with Gandalf and Galadriel, return to Amon-Sul Tower. After Galadriel saw Arwen off to her chamber, they gathered in the tower's sitting room. Gandalf settled into an armchair beside the hearth, prodding a fire salamander with his tongs and drawing thoughtfully on his pipe. He kept an eye on Dewey, who sat with his hands folded and a faraway look. "Duir," Gandalf said finally, "something is troubling you?" Dewey nodded, serious. "During the feast, I felt a gaze, cold and malicious, coming from the direction of the students." "A gaze of malice?" Gandalf stopped his pipe and looked up. "Are you certain it came from the students' side?" "Yes," Dewey replied. "It was subtle and withdrawn almost at once, but I am sure of the direction." "And you tried to read them?" Dewey's voice tightened. "You know I have legilimency. I probed the students' minds," he met Gandalf's eyes, "and found nothing. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary." Gandalf's expression turned grave. He did not doubt Dewey's perception. He had himself learned to guard his thoughts against Dewey's talent. That the principal's legilimency returned only normal, empty impressions from so many minds was the anomaly. The simplest explanation was that whoever had harbored that malice could evade legilimency, a feat beyond a mere child. "Duir," Gandalf said quietly, "do you suspect someone has infiltrated the school, disguised as a student?" Dewey nodded. "That seems the only explanation. A child could not conceal such hatred from me, and also hide from my legilimency." "What will you do?" "No need to rush," Dewey said. "I'll start by checking the freshman roster in the admissions ledger for anything out of place." He gathered a pinch of flue powder, tossed it into the hearth, and stepped into the green-flamed fire. For a minute, the flames burned strange and bright. Then Dewey stepped out of the hearth into the room again, holding a thick dragonhide admissions book. Besides recording those with magic talent, the Book of Admissions can also tell whether the people listed are healthy and alive. If someone with magic talent loses their power in an accident or dies, the book will remove them. Dewey opened the dragonhide book. It floated before him, turned to the second page, and displayed the roster of new students for the year. Dewey scanned every name carefully, and Gandalf rose to join him. 73 first years from my territory, 30 from Hogsmeade, 23 from Bree, 20 from Isengard, all normal. Also 31 elves from Rivendell, Lothlorien, the Woodland Realm, Dorwinion, Lindon, and the Grey Havens, plus 17 northern Dunedain and 3 southern Dunedain, no problems. He watched the list for any name dimming or going gray. None did. His gaze, however, lingered on the 3 southern Dunedain recruited by Gondor, areas dangerously close to Mordor. If anyone would hold a grudge against him, it would be Mordor. Dewey suspected Sauron's meddling and resolved to keep a close eye out. Gandalf seemed to read his thoughts and cautioned, "If it's Mordor, it won't be obvious. We need to check every year group, not just the first years." He asked quietly, "Gandalf, please pay extra attention to the first years. If there's anything off, let me know." Gandalf agreed. "Leave it to me. We won't let a malicious influence spoil the children's safety." Gandalf's flying class would be especially telling. When students flew fast and hard, true nature often slipped out. With Narya, the Ring of Fire, sharpening his sensitivity to emotion, and with Gandalf's own wisdom, any hidden malice would betray itself as a flicker of feeling. Galadriel drifted down the stairway, having overheard. "This semester, I'll take Arwen's History of Magic class," she said. "I'll do my share. Leave the second years to me." "Thank you, Lady Galadriel," Dewey said without ceremony. She studied him for a moment. "You don't intend to tell Arwen about this, do you?" Dewey's face tightened. "Arwen is near her due date. If she knew we suspected a saboteur among the students, she'd worry herself sick. You know how much she cares for them." Arwen was gentle and even-tempered, beloved by all the staff. Pregnancy had only amplified her maternal instincts. She treated her students like her own. If she knew someone might be targeting them, or her, she would never rest. I'd rather have her in Rivendell or Lothlorien to recuperate until we've found the rat, Dewey continued. Only you can move her without arousing suspicion. Galadriel's worry matched his. I'll discuss it with Elrond and have Arwen brought back to Rivendell. She'll be safe there, with proper medical care and the best physicians for the delivery. Even with Gandalf, Galadriel, and Dewey guarding the school, Arwen's condition could not be risked. They would err on the side of caution. On the first weekend of the term, after messages from Dewey and Galadriel, Elrond arrived at the castle and escorted Arwen away. Once she was gone, Dewey let himself breathe more freely and threw himself into the search. Gandalf and Galadriel watched classes covertly. The castle's portraits were set to constant vigilance. Dewey kept his palantir active, and even Peeves was put on a special assignment to hunt whatever or whoever was hiding among the students. As the castle's poltergeist, Peeves knew the place intimately, often better than Dewey himself. Unfortunately, a month of surveillance produced nothing. The hidden presence seemed to have noticed the watchfulness and vanished into the crowd, revealing no trace. Neither Gandalf's flying class nor Galadriel's history of magic showed any abnormal students under their scrutiny. Every child, when observed, behaved like a child, normal, innocent thoughts and moods. It was as if Dewey's suspicions were a private paranoia. Yet Gandalf and Galadriel did not falter. If anything, the lack of evidence only made them more alert. Whoever could hide so perfectly under such scrutiny must be formidable. In the meantime, Peeves had become everyone's favorite target of complaint. He lurked in shadowy corners and leapt out to grab noses, yelling, "Gotcha!" He scrawled on walls, flung moldy bread and cheese at students, and disrupted lessons, popping up from beneath desks to scare students mid-spell so their wands sputtered and sparks flew. At night, he tiptoed into dorms, stole pajamas and nightcaps, and pinched sleeping noses and mouths until pupils woke choking. Students and professors demanded Dewey discipline him. Dewey forbade Peeves from entering the dormitories and from interrupting classes. With those limits, life calmed. Teachers tolerated a little harmless mischief, and students still enjoyed the occasional cat-and-mouse playtime with the poltergeist. But the search itself remained maddeningly fruitless. Then, in one dormitory, a student slid a simple gold ring set with a sapphire onto a finger. To anyone glancing from across the room, it looked ordinary, with only the faintest tremor of power, so subtle you'd assume it was an ordinary ring if you didn't examine it closely. Those who could sense magic, however, would have felt the corruption within, a low, seductive will, quietly coaxing and corrupting. In the dim light, the students' eyes glittered with malice, and a cruel smile curled at the corner of their mouth. "Dewey," they whispered, voice cold and eager, "I'll give you a big surprise." Another month passed in the blink of an eye. The school remained as peaceful as ever. Aside from Peeves's endless pranks, nothing major disturbed the daily routine. Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel looked relaxed on the surface, but none of them had let their guard down. 2 months into the term, Dewey was growing impatient. The hidden infiltrator still hadn't been revealed. A thief can hide for 1,000 days, he thought, but no one can stand watch forever. He could not allow whoever was lurking in the school to keep operating under his nose. The idea that someone might be laughing at their fruitless searches was intolerable. After 2 months of coordinated efforts between him, Galadriel, and Gandalf, the intruder's continued success only proved how difficult the culprit was to catch. Dewey had to try other means to expose them quickly. If this person caused real harm among the more than 200 students, the consequences would be irreparable. He thought of the Marauders map. The Marauders map, created by James Potter and his friends, showed every corridor of Hogwarts and could name everyone and every ghost within in real time. Not even the most powerful witches and wizards could hide from it. Dewey didn't know the exact tricks used to originally make it, but with his current skill in alchemy and enchantment, forging one himself would not be impossible. The original creators had been only in their 4th or 5th year when they made it. The magic used couldn't be beyond his reach. He estimated it would take at most half a month. The most tedious part had always been surveying and drawing a complete, accurate blueprint of the castle. The marauders had spent 6 months on it. Dewey was spared that labor. When he'd commissioned the dwarf Balin to build the castle, Balin had left behind the construction blueprints. With those, on a sheet of dragonhide and using specially concocted unfading ink, Dewey began to reproduce the whole castle, Weathertop, a stretch of the Black Lake, every tower and corridor, precisely as needed for the map. No sooner had he begun the work than the hidden hand struck. November in Eriador brought a cold north wind. The Black Lake below the mountain had taken on a thin skin of ice, and Hogsmeade's residents bundled into warm cloaks and spent their hours by hearths. Hogwarts on the mountaintop, however, was another world. While the foothills succumbed to winter, the summit remained warm and fresh as spring. The golden malong tree and the silver-white white tree shed a gentle glow. Lawns were still green, flowers still bloomed, and the surrounding woods showed no hint of decay. That perpetual spring was not natural alone. Gandalf and Galadriel's presence, bearers of Narya, the Ring of Fire, and Nenya, the Ring of Water, kept the hills' time slowed and its climate tempered. Life lingered up on Weathertop when the world below had already turned brittle. In that warm, comfortable air, the school gathered for another Quidditch match. Nearly every student and professor crowded the Quidditch pitch to watch Phoenix House face Basilisk House. Dewey, however, stayed behind in his office, bent over the map. A sudden flurry of footsteps and a frantic knock broke the quiet. "Come in," he called, looking up. "Principal Dewey, something's happened." Professor Edward burst inside, breathless and alarmed. Dewey's expression tightened. "What is it?" "During the match," Edward said, hardly holding himself together. "Several of Phoenix House's brooms malfunctioned and literally fell apart mid-flight. Some players plunged toward the ground. If Professor Gandalf hadn't reacted so quickly and rescued them, they would have been badly hurt, possibly worse." Dewey's face hardened. "Who did this? Why did the brooms fail? Have they been found?" Edward shook his head. "I came straight here. Professor Gandalf and Madame Galadriel insisted you be fetched immediately." "Then let's go." Dewey rose without another word and followed Edward to the pitch. By the time they arrived, the spectators had been sent back to the castle. Only Gandalf, Galadriel, Professor Ellensis, the potions master and dean of Basilisk House, and a single Basilisk House student in a Quidditch uniform remained on the field. Gandalf and Galadriel looked grim. Ellensis appeared shaken. The Basilisk student was sobbing uncontrollably, eyes wide with fear. Dewey took in the boy at a glance, a first year from Gondor, one of the southern Dunedain. The name came back to him, Angmar. "Gandalf, Madame Galadriel, what happened? Have you found who sabotaged the brooms?" Dewey asked. Gandalf met his gaze and nodded. "Thanks to Madame Galadriel, the perpetrator was found right after the incident. It's this student, Angmar." He indicated the trembling boy. "He admits that before the match he sneaked into the Phoenix House broom cupboard, used Alohomora to get inside, and then sabotaged the broom's internal mechanisms so they would come apart in midair." Dewey turned his full attention to the boy. "Angmar, explain yourself. Why would you do that? Do you understand you could have killed your classmates?" Dewey had been watching these students when investigating the infiltrator. In his opinion, Angmar, shy, reserved, from an impoverished noble line in Gondor, had always seemed determined to grow stronger, not to commit something deliberately murderous. Now the boy trembled, tears streaking his face, every line of him crumpled in terror and regret. "Please, please don't expel me," Angmar sobbed. "I don't know why I did it. There was a voice in my head telling me to ruin the Phoenix brooms so we'd win the cup. I didn't want to, I really didn't, but I couldn't stop myself." Dewey's face grew more solemn as he listened to Angmar's broken words. Having used legilimency, he was certain the man wasn't lying. "All right, Mr. Angmar, don't be afraid. I believe you." He softened his tone to reassure him. "But to be sure, I need to use a spell to examine your body. Don't resist, okay?" Angmar nodded, sobbing. Dewey raised his wand and chanted. A white light washed over Angmar, probing for abnormalities. Before long, a trace of dark arts energy showed up within him, black and corrupt against the holy white glow. Along with it came an aura of temptation and decay that made Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel's expressions harden. It was only a residue of the dark arts and could not harm them, but its flavor was unmistakable. Dewey felt cold disgust. The corrupt, seductive quality of the aura was something he associated only with Sauron. His suspicion of who was working in the shadows sharpened into burning intent. Still, seeing Angmar terrified, he forced himself to calm down and waved his wand. Expecto Patronum! A phoenix patronus burst from his wand and wrapped around Angmar, scattering and purifying the lingering corruption. Since Duir had become an animagus in the shape of a phoenix, his patronus had shifted from an owl to a blazing bird. A patronus is the purest form of white magic, light and hope made manifest, and it was especially effective against the dark arts. The trace of corruption dissolved almost at once. Angmar felt lighter. The tempting voice in his head faded. He didn't know what Duir had done, only that it had helped. He looked up with tear-filled eyes, trembling. "Please, Principal, don't expel me. If you don't expel me, I'll accept any punishment," he sobbed. "I don't know why I did those things. I couldn't control it. It was as if two people were living in my head." "I believe you, Mr. Angmar. I know you didn't mean to," Duir said gently. "You won't be expelled." Then, changing the subject, he added, "Have you come into contact with anything unusual recently? Anything you found irresistible?" Angmar's tearful face cleared a little, and he instinctively shook his head. Then, as if remembering, he hung his head in shame and mumbled, "A few days ago I picked up a gold ring. It looked expensive, and somehow I couldn't stop hiding it." A gold ring. Duir, Gandalf, and Galadriel snapped to alertness. Rings set every one of them on edge. "Where is the ring? Can you show us?" Duir asked, keeping his urgency under control. Angmar looked guilty and nervous. "It went missing before the Quidditch match. The voice in my head stopped then. I was so terrified of being discovered for sabotaging the broom that I couldn't remember exactly when it disappeared." Duir believed him, and his stomach dropped. A lead had appeared and then vanished. Whoever was behind this was clever and cautious. He pressed on. "Do you remember where you found it? Did anyone see you pick it up? Roommates? Classmates?" Angmar shook his head. "I found the ring on the sink in the second-floor restroom. It was just there. I thought someone had lost it. I hid it instead of turning it in, so no one knows." Duir frowned. The second-floor restroom was public. Anyone could have left the ring there. Worse, it felt like the ring had been planted for Angmar to find, and whoever had put it there likely retrieved it after he lost it. Gandalf and Galadriel shared his suspicion, their faces grave. They switched to mind communication, voices quiet in the shared link. Galadriel's thought touched Duir first. "What do you think about the ring?" Gandalf's followed, watching Duir for his conclusion. Duir met their eyes and answered inwardly. "That ring bears a tempting power. It must be one of Sauron's rings of power. I destroyed 2 of the 9 rings of men. The remaining 7 keep the ringwraiths bound. Sauron wouldn't casually throw away a ring or a ringwraith and have it sent into the castle," he went on. "Of the dwarven rings, 3 were once in Sauron's hands. I'd already destroyed 1 dwarf ring before, leaving 2. The likeliest explanation is that Sauron gave one of the dwarf rings to the agent in the shadows to bring inside." Gandalf asked, "Could the one in the shadows be a ringwraith?" Duir's reply was dark. "No, ringwraiths are corrupted creatures tied to their rings. No matter how carefully they hide, the 3 of us would detect their dark aura. The only one who could evade our senses is Saruman. When I destroyed his body, his soul fled to Mordor. He could have regained power with Sauron's help and been ordered to slip in among the students." Gandalf and Galadriel both inclined their heads in agreement. Then Galadriel asked, "What does Saruman hope to gain by infiltrating now?" Duir and Gandalf exchanged a look and reached the same conclusion. Duir's voice was flat inside their minds. "Sauron wants the one ring above all. He must suspect that I know where it is, perhaps even suspect I possess it, so he sent Saruman in hopes of finding it." Gandalf added another piece. "Don't forget the Philosopher's Stone. It can restore a body. Neither Sauron nor Saruman would ignore the chance to seize it." "I know," Duir nodded. "I always keep the Philosopher's Stone with me. I won't give Saruman the chance." Galadriel's eyes flashed with worry as she warned, "And that ring must be found quickly. Sauron poured evil into it. Even brief contact can corrupt us, let alone children. They could not afford delay." After deducing who was skulking in the shadows and why, Duir, Gandalf, and Galadriel tightened the school's security. Word spread quickly among the other professors that an enemy had infiltrated the castle, and everyone fell into a state of high alert. The four house heads took responsibility for their students, forbidding anyone from wandering alone. Professors patrolled the corridors day and night. Portraits were hung in every corner as extra eyes, ensuring there were no blind spots. The atmosphere at the school turned suddenly tense. The students were baffled. All they knew was that since the last Quidditch match, when brooms disintegrated, the staff had become unusually serious. Still, they complied. Outside class, they kept to their dormitories and common rooms, and when they did go out, it was in pairs or small groups. Even Peeves, usually a whirlwind of mischief, quieted down. As the castle's spirit, Peeves knew more than most, and he had been furious when the shadowy intruder spoiled his pranking opportunities. He swore to catch the culprit and teach them a lesson. Peeves began threading through walls and hiding in places portraits couldn't watch, especially the toilets, and ambushed anyone who looked suspicious. He would leap out, pinch a nose, and shout, "Gotcha! Little rat, you can't escape Peeves's eyes!" Most of the students Peeves nabbed turned out to be nothing more than pranksters sneaking food or skipping curfew, not the infiltrator the professors feared. Still, Peeves's efforts calmed the more troublesome kids and temporarily disrupted whatever the person in the shadows had been doing. The staff were left scratching their heads about some pupil's odd decision to sneak snacks into toilets, Dewey included, who could only gape when told the details. The school's initial suspect had been Angmar, a first-year who'd been found with a ring of power. Dewey docked 50 house points from Angmar for violating school rules and sent him back to his house. He did not announce that Angmar had been blamed for the Phoenix House brooms disintegrating. Publicly linking Angmar to that incident would have made him a target and risked conflict between houses. Behind the scenes, Dewey interviewed Angmar's roommates and classmates to see if Saruman might be hiding among them. After all, the ring had clearly been planted by someone who knew Angmar. But no dark aura appeared, no sign of possession, no trace of contact with the ring. The inquiry turned up nothing. Not finding a clear trail did not defeat Dewey. He beefed up surveillance, put Gandalf and Galadriel in charge of the watch, and threw himself into finishing the Marauders' map. With the boost of a vitality potion and the insight granted by the Crown of Wisdom, he worked day and night and progressed rapidly. Somewhere in the shadows, Saruman seemed to sense the tightening net. Just as Dewey neared completion of the map, another emergency broke. Edward's knock on the headmaster's door was urgent enough to send a shiver through Dewey. "Something happened?" he asked before the boy could speak. Edward, breathless, blurted, "3 students from Dragon House, Professor Gandalf and Madame Galadriel are there. They said you should come at once." Dewey didn't pause for details. He hurried to the scene, the castle kitchens. 3 second-year students lay on the floor. Gandalf, Galadriel, and Dean Margales of Dragon House were already at their sides. Peeves was up above, tap-dancing joyfully and waving a Quidditch beater's bat, mumbling and cheering. Peeves caught the culprit. Dewey's pupils narrowed as he crouched to examine the boys. Relief came first. They were all breathing. 2 had clearly been struck by stupefy spells. The third had a heavy, ugly bump on the back of his head, as if clubbed from behind. "What happened?" Dewey demanded. "Gandalf? Galadriel?" Gandalf shook his head. "We arrived moments before you, and the scene was already like this. The portraits alerted us. Peeves was the first to find them." Dewey looked up at the poltergeist. "Peeves, tell me exactly what you saw." Peeves puffed up with pride, clutching the beater's bat as if it were a trophy. "Oh, it was terrifying, just terrible. Those 3 lads from Dragon House sneaked into the kitchen." He jabbed a finger at the boy with the bump. "And this one was the villain. He led the others in, then snuck a spell at them from behind and floored them both. His eyes were dreadful. I hid in the wall and only peeped. And then, oh, he pulled out a bottle of black potion to pour into the dinner. Poison it, I tell you. But I rushed in and bonked him on the head with my bat." "Hey, Principal, Peeves did a good thing, didn't he? Caught the bad boy," he crowed, preening. Dewey's expression hardened at the mention of a black potion. "Where is the bottle?" "Ta-da!" Peeves hopped about and produced a small black vial. Peeves snatched it away from the villain at once. Gandalf and Galadriel's faces changed at once. "Dewey, don't touch it with your bare hands," they warned. Dewey heeded them. He cast a levitation charm and raised the vial into the air. The liquid inside was an oily, impenetrable black. Dewey turned it toward Gandalf and Galadriel. Galadriel stepped forward and peered into the vial. She closed her eyes and reached out with sensing that went beyond eyesight. When she spoke, her voice was heavy. "This bottle contains the Black Death Plague," she said, "a very evil virus." When Dewey heard it named as a plague virus, he almost trembled. Instinctively, he flung the black vial away and scrambled back, then immediately started casting containment spells. He wove wards around the vial, sent cleansing charms over Peeves and the 3 unconscious students, everyone who might have touched the bottle. Even a trace could be catastrophic. Gandalf stared at the vial with a face drained of color and let out a long breath. "I know this plague," he said. "It came from the east on a black wind. The Black Death swept across Middle-earth, devastating the peoples and livestock, killing kings and commoners alike. King Telumethar of Gondor and his children perished. The White Tree withered and died. Osgiliath became a ghostly ruin. Rovanion lost more than half its population and its strength. Cardolan was nearly wiped out and ceased to be a kingdom." "I thought that scourge had long ago passed," he went on, disgust and anger sharpening his voice, "but it still exists after 1,000 years, and now it has been brought into Hogwarts." He looked at Dewey. "This is the work of Sauron and Saruman, a deliberate attempt to unleash the plague inside the castle, infect everyone here. This virus is cursed. Any contact allows it to spread. Even if it doesn't kill us outright, it will weaken and drain us." Hearing that, Dewey felt fear flare and then a cold rush of anger. Saruman and Sauron would stoop to anything. If they had managed to lace food or drink in the kitchens, students and staff alike might have fallen ill before anyone knew what struck them. Even with magic and potions, panic would have torn the castle apart. And in that chaos, those hidden in the shadows could act. Worse still, if the plague left Hogwarts on the feet of students traveling home, it could sweep across Hogsmeade, Bree, Isengard, and beyond, another ruinous pandemic for Middle-earth. He would not be careless. After reinforcing the wards, Dewey slid the black vial into a sealed mithril box, then nested that box inside several more, each locked and warded, until there was no conceivable chance of leakage. There was nothing to be done with it but seal and protect it for the time being. Only then did Dewey let himself breathe. He glanced at Peeves, still bouncing in midair, and for the first time felt genuine gratitude toward the poltergeist. "Peeves," he said, keeping his voice calm, "you did well. You probably stopped a disaster. Think about a reward. After this is over, and so long as it's not outlandish, I'll consider it." Peeves's eyes gleamed and a triumphant grin split his face. Dewey ignored the delighted sprite. There were more urgent matters. He turned to the 3 students on the floor. 2 had been stunned with stupefy. 1 had been knocked out by Peeves. Dewey cast a steadying healing charm, and the 3 gradually came to. The 2 who had been stupefied blinked, dazed, then remembered. Anger and confusion flared across their faces. "Eamon, why did you attack us?" one demanded. The other added, "Professors, what's going on?" As the students sat up and the professors gathered, Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel's eyes were drawn to the second-year Dragon House student, Eamon, specifically to the gold ring on his finger. At first glance, it looked ordinary, a band of gold set with a single diamond, but all 3 could sense a malign presence emanating from it. "Eamon," Dewey said, keeping his tone steady but urgent, "where did you get that ring?" Startled, Eamon instinctively curled inward and tried to hide his hand. The professors frowned. Gandalf stepped forward and spoke gently. "Eamon, that ring is dangerous. Prolonged contact will harm you. Please, remove it and let us contain it." The warning only made Eamon more wary. He tightened his fist around his hand and backed away. Gandalf quietly activated Narya, his ring of fire. Its comforting warmth meant to soothe and calm, and approached the boy, still attempting to persuade him. Eamon muttered to himself under his breath, head down. When Gandalf reached out and laid a hand on Eamon's shoulder, the boy snapped up so fast his face changed. Madness and possessiveness lit his eyes. He bared his teeth and lunged at Gandalf. "Precious, my precious, no one takes it." Dewey reacted instantly. He cast Petrificus Totalis and froze Eamon in a rigid wooden posture. Without a flicker of expression, Dewey slipped on dragonhide gloves and with careful fingers took the ring from the boy's finger. As soon as it was off, the wildness ebbed from Eamon's face. He sank into despair, tears running, words of regret bubbling out. When Dewey released the spell, Eamon crumpled, overwhelmed by shame and fear. "I didn't mean to. I don't know what came over me. Please, don't expel me," he sobbed. Dewey put the ring on the table. Even through the dragonhide gloves, its pull was visceral. A whispering temptation urged him to put it on. He forced himself back, drawing a few paces away until the urge loosened its grip. Gandalf and Galadriel bent to examine the ring. Gandalf's voice was low with a mix of astonishment and alarm. "This is the Ring of Thror, the last of the 7 dwarf rings." He told them what he knew. The Ring of Thror had belonged to Durin's line, passed down to Thrain Su, father of Thorin Oakenshield. In TA 2845, while traveling toward the Lonely Mountain to learn more of the dragon Smaug, Thrain was captured by Sauron's servants, held in Dol Guldur, tortured and questioned, and his ring was taken by Sauron. Somehow now, the ring had been brought to Hogwarts. Gandalf explained the danger. Sauron had infused the 7 dwarf rings with malign influence. Unlike the 9 given to men, whose wearers could become ringwraiths, dwarves, made stubborn and strong by Ale, resisted Sauron's direct dominion. The dwarf rings did not make dwarves into wraiths. They magnified their lust for treasure and made greed worse. But when such a ring falls into the hands of other races, its danger deepens. In human hands, a dwarf ring can corrupt its bearer dangerously, second only to the One Ring in the threat it poses. The dwarven ring was dangerously volatile and could not be handled directly, so Dewey quickly produced a mithril box and locked it inside to be dealt with later. His attention snapped back to Eamon. "Mr. Eamon," he asked, voice steady, "where did you get this ring? Who gave it to you? And who gave you that vial? Who told you to put it in the food?" Under Dewey's penetrating gaze, Eamon felt stripped of every secret. He trembled, tears running down his face, his eyes full of fear, regret, and bewilderment. "I can't remember who gave it to me," he sobbed. "It seemed like a classmate from my house. I can't even picture his face, only that he said something, and I just went blank. I only wanted to obey him. He gave me the ring and told me to wear it, and he gave me a vial and told me to sneak to the kitchens and put the medicine in the food and drink. But the headmaster forbade students from acting alone, so I persuaded my 2 roommates to go with me to get food. Lots of people in our house do that when they miss meals, so they didn't suspect anything. Headmaster, I swear I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I used stupefy to knock them out so they wouldn't be harmed. Please don't expel me. I'll accept any punishment, please." The boy's tears flowed as he spoke. Losing his place at school terrified him. Dewey, who had legitimacy, confirmed in Eamon's mind that he was telling the truth. Gandalf and Galadriel, likewise, could tell when someone was lying. The 3 exchanged grave looks. Dewey softened and patted Eamon on the shoulder. "Don't panic, Eamon. No one here will expel you. That ring is seductive. Anyone who wore it would struggle to resist. Even we, as professors, would find its influence hard to fight. You are not to blame for what it made you do." He turned to Eamon's 2 roommates. "Please take Mr. Eamon to the infirmary and hand him to Madame Amanda, and keep this between us." They nodded, and shaken but understanding, led Eamon away. Peeves had found him after the attack and had struck the back of his head with a bat. Dewey had healed the bump, but the brain is fragile and needed a physician's care. More worrying was that Eamon had worn the dwarven ring long enough for its corruption to take hold internally. Its lingering influence could not be cured overnight. They might need Elrond himself to eradicate it entirely. But first, they had to find Saruman, the saboteur hidden among the students. Had Peeves not discovered the controlled Eamon in time, the poisoned food and drink might have been served, and many students and teachers could have been infected. Dewey's anger flared at the thought. He ordered every student to return to their dormitories to be supervised by their house deans, then, with Gandalf and Galadriel, headed straight for Dragon House. Eamon could only remember that his attacker was a fellow student from his house, so Dewey began there. The Dragon House common room was full, every one of its 50-odd students present except Eamon. Without preamble, Dewey raised his wand and began to scan them, watching faces and probing minds as the wand shed a soft white light. The The students, puzzled, lined up obediently. One by one, the inspections revealed nothing, until a first-year witch stepped forward. Under Dewey's light, a thin residue of dark aura, like black smoke, coalesced around her. The girl stared at the shadowy stain with the same startled bewilderment as the rest of the room. Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel grew immediately solemn. The girl had clearly been in contact with the ring and showed signs of being touched by the dark arts. But she was not the mastermind they sought. It soon became clear that whoever had posed as Saruman's target had used this girl as an intermediary, manipulating her to hand the ring and the vial to Eamon, while the real Saruman remained hidden, revealing no trace of himself. Dewey had Dean Margels escort the girl to the infirmary for treatment, then swept through the other 3 houses. To his fury and disbelief, he still found no sign of Saruman, but he did uncover several other students who had handled the dwarven ring and carried a taint of dark aura. Each had been exposed long enough for their minds to be partially eroded. If not for the inspection, their wills might have been twisted further into darkness. "What does Saruman want?" Dewey ground out. The betrayal of children ignited something like hatred in him. Gandalf and Galadriel matched his outrage. Saruman's methods were despicable in the extreme. All students bearing the dark trace were sent to the infirmary. Madame Amanda, appalled, tended them with pity and indignation and railed against the hidden culprit. Together, Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel worked to strip the residual taint from the children. For most, their efforts sufficed. For those who had only brief contact, the healing held. For students like Eamon, however, whose minds had been exposed to the ring for longer, even Galadriel could not fully purge the corruption. There was no choice. Dewey sought help from his father-in-law, Elrond, who was in Rivendell. Dewey deliberately avoided informing Arwen. When Elrond arrived at the school and saw the afflicted students, his usually gentle face tightened. Hearing that Saruman was likely behind it, the Elf Lord's eyes flashed with distaste and something like murderous resolve. Elrond, famed as the foremost healer in Middle-earth, set to work. Wielding Vilya, the Ring of Air, he performed cures that restored most of the students and prevented their minds from being further twisted by the Dwarven Ring's influence. For those who had been tainted only lightly, the danger passed. For the worst cases, his intervention at least halted the corruption and bought them a chance at full recovery. Under Elrond's care, the students only needed regular treatments. Otherwise, they could move about freely and continue classes, Quidditch, and other activities. Conservatively, Elrond said, it would take no more than 2 months to undo the corruption completely, leaving no lingering danger. Dewey let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said, gratitude plain in his voice. "Lord Elrond, if not for you, I wouldn't even know how to tell the parents what happened." Dewey had considered sending the students home until he could find Saruman, who was hiding among them. The longer the children remained at the castle, the greater the risk. Saruman had already turned to madness, trying first to spread a dark pestilence and then to twist minds with the evil power of a dwarven ring. Elrond gave a small, sober shake of his head. He brushed aside Dewey's thanks and then asked the question that mattered most. "What will you do about Saruman? If he's hiding among the students, their safety is directly threatened. We cannot let this go on. He must be found as soon as possible. If he takes another desperate step, it could be irreversible." "And Arwen has already sensed that something is wrong at Hogwarts," he added quietly. "Out of respect for you, she pretends not to know, but I can feel her worry. If we do not resolve this quickly, she will be unable to rest." Hearing Arwen's name, Dewey felt a stab of guilt. He knew how perceptive she was. She had probably realized the truth when he persuaded her to go to Rivendell to recuperate and give birth, and was pretending ignorance to spare him. "Lord Elrond, you have my word," Dewey replied. "I'll sort this out. Saruman won't be able to roam free for long. The Marauder's map I'm building will be finished in a week. When it's complete, wherever he hides, I'll drag him out." Elrond relaxed visibly. "All right, then I will stay and help finish the map as quickly as possible." Dewey brightened at once. With Elrond's help, he knew the map would be completed far sooner. Elrond had taught himself runes and alchemy while helping Dewey with the Philosopher's Stone. His command of magic and alchemy now rivaled Dewey's. With both of them working, the map's creation could be halved. But until the map is ready, Elrond said, our priority must be to keep the students safe and to prevent Saruman from sensing danger and taking more desperate actions. Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel agreed. They decided on a threefold defense that used the power of the three rings of the elves. Galadriel used Nenya, the ring of water, drawing on the black lake beneath the mountain to weave a barrier that sealed the castle. No one could enter, and none could leave. Gandalf channeled Narya, the ring of fire, into every flame, torches, hearths, and candles alike, so that wherever the light burned, it would fill the good and brave with heat and courage, while those with malice in their hearts would feel it as agony, like sunlight to a creature of darkness. Elrond took Vilya, the ring of air, and using the fruit of the white tree in Dewey's garden as a focus, brewed a protective draught. He mixed that draught, subtly, into the beverages the students commonly drank. As they sipped, each child would be shielded by Vilya's power. Before the potion wore off, no corrupting force could take root in their minds. And because Saruman might be moving in spirit or possessing bodies, the infusion would cause any such intruder great pain. They tested the wards that night. The castle was flooded with light. Every corridor, dormitory, past common room, and the great hall blazed with warm, steady flames. Where the enchanted fire burned, anyone of evil bent would be weakened and in torment. Galadriel's outer barrier held fast, cutting off every avenue of escape. Elrond and Dewey threw themselves into finishing the Marauder's map, moving through lists and wards and sigils by candlelight, knowing every hour counted. Yet despite the potions and the lights, no obvious sign of Saruman appeared. Either he was clever enough not to drink the infused drinks, or he drank and masked it. In either case, he was not showing himself. Dewey feared the worst, that Saruman, though hidden, was still dangerous and in pain, like a vampire forced to endure the sun. Later that night, Professor Luke, the charms master on patrol, walked the second-floor corridor and found two students slumped in a dim alcove. Portraits along the wall hung slack and silent. The usual chatter of painted faces was gone. Luke's face tightened. He knelt beside the nearest boy and checked for signs of life. Both were breathing but unresponsive. He drew his wand and whispered a revival charm. "Renervate." One boy's eyelids fluttered, and he sat up, blinking in confusion. "Professor Luke? What happened?" Luke helped him to his feet. "Tell me what you know. Who attacked you? Did you see anything?" The student's gaze went past Luke, and horror washed across his face. He turned so pale, Luke felt his own blood run cold. Luke swung around and sent a warding spell into the empty corridor. Expelliarmus! A red jet of light flashed down the passage, illuminating the polished floor and the sleeping portraits, but there was nothing there. Before Luke could ask the boy what he had seen, a spell struck him from behind. His spine locked, his limbs went rigid. He froze mid-turn, his mouth open in shocked disbelief. Only the whites of his eyes darted. The student who had just woken drew his wand with a cruel, practiced motion and fired Stupefy at his companion. The second boy collapsed at once, stunned. Then the waking boy strolled over to the stiff, petrified Professor Luke with a slow, casual smile that did not belong on a child's face. He looked down at Luke as if appraising a prize. "Professor," he said, voice cold and hungry with mockery, "I'll be borrowing your body for a while." Footsteps came running down the corridor. "What happened, Professor Luke?" Other professors, led by Vice Principal Edward, were drawn by the commotion. They found Professor Luke standing over two students sprawled on the floor. A nearby portrait hung askew, and its subject lay inert on the canvas. Luke's face was grim. "I just arrived and found two students unconscious, and even the portrait had been struck." "What?" The professors' faces went pale as they bent to check the boys. Luke raised a hand to reassure them. "Don't worry, I examined them. They were only hit with Stupefy. No lasting injuries. I've already cast a reviving charm. They should come around." At that, both students blinked and sat up, bewildered. Vice Principal Edward crouched and asked, "Damon, Eric, do you remember who attacked you?" Both shook their heads. "Professor, we don't. We remember leaving the library to go back to the dorms and then nothing. We woke up here." Edward turned to the portrait and waved his wand, breaking whatever spell held it. The framed knight stirred, confused. "Professors, why are you all here?" "Sir Knight, did you see who attacked you, Damon and Eric?" Edward asked. The painted knight searched his memory, then shook his head. I didn't see who it was. The figure wasn't tall, likely a student. Another lead gone. Edward's shoulders dropped. At that moment, Gandalf and Lady Galadriel arrived. Edward's expression brightened as he hurried to meet them. Professor Gandalf, Lady Galadriel, you've come just in time. Gandalf and Galadriel both frowned. Saruman had acted boldly and quickly, even targeting students. They moved closer, examining the two boys. Both exchanged a look of alarm and fixed their attention on Damon. Through thought speech, Galadriel said to Gandalf, "There are residual traces of dark power on him. He's been in contact with a ring of power, and I sense signs of possession." Gandalf nodded. Saruman has clearly shifted his host, but we don't know who he's in now. As Maiar, even in embodied soul forms, Gandalf and Galadriel found certain possessions difficult to detect. If Saruman hid within someone, their senses could be fooled. Gandalf sighed. I just hope Duir and Lord Elrond can finish the Marauders map quickly so we can find him. He instructed the professors to take both boys, especially Damon, who had been touched by Saruman, to the infirmary at once. Having two souls tangled in one body, with Saruman's powerful presence intruding on Damon's, required purification and a soul stabilizer to settle the boy's spirit. They're both from my house. I'll escort them to the infirmary myself, Luke volunteered. No one objected. After he left with Damon and Eric, the other professors spread out for a thorough search, checking for lone students or anyone suspicious. Gandalf questioned nearby portraits about who had passed through the corridor earlier. Not many, one portrait complained. First 2 Thunderbird students, then Professor Luke on patrol, and after that, you and the other professors. Oh, someone cast a spell here just now. A red flash nearly hit my frame. Gandalf's eyes narrowed. Stupefy had been used on the students, but that curse doesn't emit a red flash. A red burst usually accompanies Expelliarmus, and the boys hadn't been disarmed. Sensing something off, Gandalf pressed the portrait. Did that spell happen before Professor Luke arrived, or after? After Professor Luke appeared, the portrait replied. Gandalf's expression hardened. He'd had a niggling doubt earlier, but had been focused on the students. Now the detail clicked. Luke had arrived first, then the strange red flash, and then he'd taken the boys to the infirmary. Either Luke had been acting oddly, or someone had been using his appearance as a disguise. Galadriel caught the look on Gandalf's face, and without a word, they both set off toward the infirmary. The other professors, seeing their urgency, followed. When they reached the infirmary, they found the entire ward filled with unconscious figures, students and staff alike. Among them lay Professor Luke. The school nurse, Madame Amanda, was missing. Gandalf's stomach dropped. We're too late, he turned to Edward. Send every student back to their dormitories at once and search for Madame Amanda, carefully. I suspect she's been possessed. Whoever controls her may use lethal curses. Take extreme caution. Edward and the others stiffened, then immediately set to work, hurrying away to carry out Gandalf's orders. If Saruman has Amanda, our other professors might not be enough. I'll go help, Galadriel said. Gandalf's expression softened. Thank you. Duir and Lord Elrond are occupied. If we can't disturb them, we must act. The Marauders map needs to be finished so we can find Saruman before he moves again. Galadriel bowed and spread her mental reach through the castle, searching for traces of Amanda and of Saruman. Gandalf remained in the infirmary. He raised his staff and released a steady, holy light that washed over the room. One by one, the unconscious people stirred as the glow faded. He looked down at Luke, who was blinking awake, and asked, voice tight with concern, Luke, do you remember what happened? Professor Luke's face had been blank with bewilderment a moment before, but recollection hit him like a cold hand. Horror replaced confusion. His voice trembled as he spoke. Gandalf, Professor Gandalf, I saw the thing in the shadows. It's not human. It's an evil, powerful ghost. I was patrolling the castle and found 2 students unconscious on the 2nd floor. Then someone ambushed me from behind when I wasn't looking. Petrificus totalis, a white ghost came out of that student's body and slid into mine. It took control of me. It overwhelmed me immediately. I could only watch as it moved my body, pretending to be me, taking the 2 students and you away, then coming to the infirmary. It used my body to attack Madame Amanda while she wasn't paying attention. Then it left me and entered Madame Amanda's body, then left her as well. Gandalf went quiet, his expression grave. What was Saruman trying to accomplish? Possessing Professor Luke and Madame Amanda in turn, treating them like toys, there had to be a purpose. He hadn't expected such a brazen maneuver without a clear goal. A rush of footsteps sounded outside the infirmary. Gandalf looked up to see Professor Edward drift through the door, using the levitation charm to carry someone into the room. It was Madame Amanda, unconscious, bloodless. "Edward, where did you find her?" Gandalf asked. Edward's face was ashen. "We found her in an empty room. She was already unconscious. The enchanted portrait shows Amanda searching for something, forcing her way into Principal Dewey's private tower and trying to escape through the fireplace there. But all the castle fireplaces had been shut down by the principal, so she couldn't get out. She left the tower, and we finally found her collapsed in a room on the 5th floor. Madame Galadriel thinks the ghost is no longer inside Amanda." Edward continued. "According to the portrait, after she left the infirmary, Amanda had contact with a number of students. Those students have since returned to their dormitories and mingled with others. Right now, any student could be possessed, and even the professors aren't safe." Gandalf's brow furrowed. "So he's looking for a fireplace. He's trying to escape through the Floo network." Outside the castle, Galadriel had raised a magical barrier with the Ring of Water. Even a ghost like Saruman couldn't slip past it. If they caught him now, he could be finished, truly destroyed, with no hope of return. The castle was guarded by 3 elven ring-bearers and Principal Dewey, Saruman's bitter adversary. If he couldn't find a way out, he faced a dead end. Since the school was founded, Dewey had cut off the Floo network for all public fireplaces. Only the fireplace in his private tower could be used for normal passage. It became clear one of Saruman's objectives was to reach Dewey's private fireplace and escape. That was likely why he had been willing to risk such clumsy possession attempts. Galadriel's barrier and Dewey's lockdown, however, meant the private fireplace was a trap too. Gandalf added, "And the vanishing cabinets. He might try those." Edward nodded. Principal Dewey thought of that. The vanishing cabinets have all been moved to the underground vault and are guarded by Dragon Smaug himself. They're secure. Good, we cannot give that thing any route of escape. Gandalf, Galadriel, and the other professors began methodically tracing every student who had been near Madame Amanda. Several showed signs of having been possessed, but had been obliviated. They remembered nothing. The affected students came from all 4 houses. Anyone in a house could be the one under Saruman's control. The professors realized helplessly that they were dealing with a cunning enemy. While Gandalf and the others worked through lists and interviews, Dewey and Elrond had locked themselves away in an office. After 3 days and nights of continuous collaboration, they emerged with what looked like a miracle, a new Marauders map. It was crafted from a single dragon hide and did more than chart Hogwarts. The map included Hogsmeade and Bree, then stretched east to the Last Bridge, south to the South Downs, west to the Barrow Downs, and north to the North Downs, almost the entire central region of Eriador. Elrond had supplied the drawings for places outside Hogwarts. With more time, he could have expanded it further. The detail was astonishing, but it was the magic woven into it that made it extraordinary. All the names of people within the mapped area appeared on the hide and moved with their owners. The map could zoom in and out, switch to a 3-dimensional perspective, and by tapping a name with a wand, turn that name into a miniature 3-dimensional figure showing every movement the person had made. It rendered a tiny, living model of central Eriador. Ordinary people glowed gem green, malicious individuals burned crimson. This was a map far beyond the Marauders map Dewey remembered. Dewey's first priority was obvious: find Saruman in the castle. He spread the Dragonhide map on the table and tapped the Hogwarts region. The castle swelled into close focus, every corridor and turret rendered in astonishing clarity. "Saruman, where are you?" he muttered, scanning. There were more than 200 names within Hogwarts alone. Finding one could take time. But Dewey and Elrond had hardly begun before both of them stopped. Saruman's name leapt out at them. Among the sea of gem-green designations, it was a shocking, unmistakable scarlet, as if written in blood. Something else made the sight worse. Another name overlapped it. Dewey's pupils constricted. His face went hard and ugly. "How could it be him?" he said under his breath. Since the professors had been attacked, the atmosphere in the castle had grown taut as a drawn bow. The staff split duties, patrolling constantly and keeping a close watch on the students. The pupils were confined to their dormitories, and the Great Hall, when not in class, required to move in groups. Every portrait was on duty. Each frame needed at least one watcher to report any movements to the nearest professors or to other frames. Even the suits of armor, usually silent and inert, were animated and patrolling every corridor. "Are the students in all the houses doing all right? No panic, no. Other reactions?" Vice Principal Edward asked as he walked the halls with Professor Luke. Luke, who had been attacked only a few days before, had recovered quickly and returned to the patrol rota. "They're fine," Luke replied with a smile. "Aside from griping about the canceled Quidditch match, they haven't shown much fear. If anything, they seem confident in the principal, especially the younger wizards under our care. They truly believe he will catch whatever's hiding here." Edward nodded, respect and relief written across his face. "So do I. Like us, the children trust the principal to solve this crisis." "I never doubted him," Luke agreed. "He's the one who turned ordinary mortals like us into witches and wizards. He's been in seclusion, preparing. When he comes out, he'll snatch that mouse and restore order." "I think so too." Edward glanced ahead. "All right, Luke, we'll split here. You take above the 4th floor. I'll check below. Be careful. That hidden person has been quiet these last few days, likely planning something nasty. Signal at once if you find anything." "I understand," Luke said. "After what happened, I'm being extra cautious." They parted, one ascending, the other descending. Edward moved floor by floor from the 4th cat, questioning the portraits about anything unusual. When his inspection concluded, he did not return to his patrol duties. Instead, he went straight to Dewey's private tower and knocked on the door. "Come in," Dewey's voice answered. Edward pushed open the door and entered the quiet living room. He crossed to the portrait above the fireplace and bowed slightly. "Lord, the number of professors in the school is insufficient. Between teaching, managing and protecting the students, and patrolling, we're spread thin. Could we wake Dragon Smog and Basilisk Herpo and have them help defend the castle?" Dewey considered the problem. There were only 11 people in the castle right now. The 8 professors, Dewey and Madame Amanda from the infirmary, and Elrond, who had arrived days earlier. Dewey and Elrond were busy compiling a Marauder's map. The professors had daytime classes plus student supervision, while at night at least one had to remain in each house dormitory. The rest were on ceaseless patrols, kept going only by the refreshing potion brewed by the potions professor. Finally, Dewey nodded. "My frame is in Herpo's Chamber of Secrets. He answers only to me. I'll wake him and have him watch the castle's pipes. As for Smog, you're familiar with him. Go wake him and put him to work." "Understood, Lord." Edward bowed. Dewey's portrait turned and faded back into the frame. Taking the key, Edward left the tower and made his way to the cellar. He stood before a mithril gate, the words "Do not disturb the sleeping dragon" carved above it. He inserted the key and spoke the password. The gate unlocked and swung open. As Dewey's butler, Edward was the 3rd person ever allowed into the dragon treasury, after Dewey and Arwen. He had dealt with Smog before, during the spider silk cloth affair. As a dragon who loved gold, Smog had always been more amenable to Edward than to his master. Edward could be counted on to bring coins into the hoard, rather than take them out. Smog smelled him and opened one lazy eye. Since swallowing the frost dragon's dragon crystal, the dragon had grown immense, nearly 500 meters long, and his fire had become searingly intense, rivaling that of the oldest dragons. Edward had come empty-handed. The look of disappointment on Smog's face shifted instantly to suspicion as the great head lifted from the gold pile and fixed on him. "Butler Edward," Smog rumbled, "what do you want? You aren't here to steal, are you?" Edward braced himself beneath that gaze. "No, Lord Smog. Dewey sent me to wake you. An enemy has appeared in the castle, lurking among the students and causing trouble. The professors are short-handed. We need your help to protect the castle." Smog's eyes narrowed. "An enemy? With the master's cunning, he should have caught anyone himself. Why summon me? Because this foe is cunning as a ghost, capable of possessing people. Edward explained. Even the Master, and Gandalf and Lady Galadriel could not see through it. Is that so? Smaug's interest sharpened. If such figures could not perceive the enemy, it must indeed be powerful. The dragon rolled forward, his massive snout nearing Edward. Or, he added, wary, you are possessed yourself, and this visit is a trick to distract me so you can steal my treasure. Edward hastened to laugh off the accusation. Lord Smaug, I assure you, I'm not possessed. Anyone mad enough to come close to you to steal would be seeking death. Exactly, Smaug boasted, lifting his head proudly. I am Smaug, the mightiest dragon in Middle-earth. Any who dare approach my hoard, even for a single coin, will feel the wrath of my flame. Very well, Lord Smaug, Edward said, bowing slightly. I have delivered Dewey's message. I must return to my patrols. As he turned, his eyes fell on a stack of vanishing cabinets haphazardly piled in a corner. He couldn't help but sigh. Lord Smaug, those vanishing cabinets are valuable alchemical objects. You should not toss them aside like rubbish. They'll be ruined. Smaug glanced at the cabinets with disdain. A pile of wood, he said, not nearly as pretty as my gold. If I rolled over them, they'd be crushed. If I sneezed, I might set them ablaze. Where else would I put them? Edward shook his head, giving up on persuading the dragon. He bid Smaug farewell, left the treasury, returned the key to Dewey's tower, and set off to continue his rounds. Smaug left the treasury by the dedicated dragon passage, climbed the cliff north of Weathertop, and took position on the castle grounds. He was too vast to enter the castle itself, so he settled on the enormous lawn outside. From that heightened size, the golden dragon could easily see what was happening on every floor. Professors and students gasped. Many had only heard the name of the great dragon and had never seen one. Even those who had were stunned by Smaug's current, overwhelming size. After the initial shock and fear, however, confidence returned. With such a gigantic dragon guarding them, what enemy could possibly threaten the castle? Students from every house crowded the windows of their dormitories and common rooms, staring up at the dragon taller than the castle itself, feeling a mixture of awe, admiration, and yearning. Could this really be the principal's legendary mount? It was immense. Then a loud voice echoed through the castle. All students, remain in your dormitories at once. Do not leave. All professors, proceed immediately to the conference room. It's the principal's voice. He's come out. At the sound of Principal Dewey's voice, students and professors brightened with hope. Only the hidden one among them stiffened. Their expression darkened and unease stirred in their chest. The students obediently filed back into their dormitories, and the entrances to the house common rooms automatically sealed and locked. Passwords meant nothing. The doors stayed shut. Anyone trying to force their way in had to give up. Professors scattered around the castle, hurried toward the conference room. Professor Edward! As Edward hurried down the corridor, a voice called from behind. He turned to see Professor Ellensis, panting and pale. Edward visibly relaxed. Ellensis, did you just rush over from the potion office? Slow down and catch your breath. Ellensis, potions master and dean of Basilisk House, had his office near the Basilisk dormitories on the first underground floor. He brewed potions for the infirmary and usually kept a low profile. Long hours away from daylight had left his complexion pale and his hair a little greasy from brewing. But unlike potions masters in other tales, Ellensis was talkative. As he walked alongside Edward, he asked, curious, do you think the principal calling us means he already knows who the hidden one is? Edward shook his head. I don't know. He said he was making something to catch the person in the dark. Maybe he's finished it. That would be wonderful. I'd like this hidden troublemaker caught quickly so we can all relax. Ellensis noticed the fatigue at Edward's temples and produced a small bottle from his robe. Drink this. I just made a vigor potion. Don't wear yourself out. Edward paused, then accepted it with relief. Thank you. I could use it. Wouldn't want to be seen like this by the principal. He reached out, but at that very moment, a shimmering magical barrier sprang up between them, stopping his hand. Both men were startled. They drew their wands and turned to face the source of the magic, only to see Principal Dewey approaching with Elrond and several other professors close behind. Principal, why are you here? Ellensis blurted, then stared at the invisible barrier. What's going on? Dewey said nothing. His gaze was cold and unblinking. Elrond stepped forward. "Professor Ellensis, please come over here." Ellensis looked from Elrond to the silent principal, then at Edward, who stood isolated behind the barrier. He was bewildered, but he obeyed and crossed to the other side. Dewey's eyes never left Edward. A slow sneer formed on his face. "Saruman," he said, "I destroyed your body before and spared only your spirit. I did not expect you to come here and cause mischief under my nose. Did Sauron give you the courage?" Edward's face went blank with confusion. "Principal, you must be mistaken. I'm not Saruman. How could I be him?" The other professors exchanged uneasy looks. They had worked with Edward for over a year. He was the vice principal and Dewey's most trusted deputy. It was hard for them to imagine such a man possessed or replaced. Yet Dewey and Elrond showed no doubt. Dewey produced a battered map made of dragonhide and shook it so that it fluttered. "You hid yourself well," he said, "so well that Gandalf, Galadriel, and I could not see you. But no matter how you hide, your true name cannot escape my marauder's map." The map pulsed with magic, and over Edward's name, a blood-red name bled across the parchment. Saruman, Carumo. Carumo, Saruman's true name in Valinor, appeared in the glowing script. At the sight of it and the map's magic, whatever cover Edward had worn slipped. His face reshaped into a harsh, sinister smile, utterly unlike the man they knew. His eyes glittered with malice. "Impressive," the voice that had been Edward said, now colder and triumphant. "Dewey, I once thought you insignificant, and yet you have trapped me again and again. I wander without a body, but you found me. What will you do to me now? Kill me?" A cruel laugh followed. "If you wish to kill me, you must first kill this body. He was your most loyal servant, so loyal he would have died rather than let me use him to deceive you. But his soul is weak. He cannot resist me, cannot even end his own life to stop me. Can you be so ruthless that you would take the life of the person most faithful to you along with me?" With that, the thing that had been Edward flicked its wand. The very barrier Dewey had raised shattered under the motion. Then a spell hurtled toward Dewey and the assembled staff. "Confringo." Dewey reacted instantly. He swerved his wand and redirected the blast. It struck the castle wall with an enormous explosion. Stone tore away, a jagged hole ripped open, and rubble flew into the air. Saruman, now in Edward's body, had full access to Edward's memories. He knew every spell Edward had learned and wielded them with devastating skill, almost a match for Dewey himself. Relying on Dewey's apparent reluctance to kill Edward, Saruman attacked without restraint. But the wand in Edward's hand carried Edward's spirit. It resisted Saruman's command, unwilling to obey him. Saruman's face darkened as he stared at the wand. "Damn wand!" The wand's resistance made casting difficult. Saruman produced another wand from somewhere and pressed on. Yet Dewey was not alone. Elrond drew his elven blade, and the ring of air on his finger flared, while Gandalf and Galadriel moved into position behind Saruman. The other professors raised their wands as well, though they deliberately avoided lethal spells, preferring restraints and binding charms meant to trap rather than kill. Gandalf, staff glowing with holy light, regarded Saruman coolly. "Surrender, Saruman. You will not escape today." Galadriel said nothing, but she did not unleash destructive magic. She raised her hand and activated the Ring of Water. The great barrier that protected the castle tightened instantly, passing through walls and bodies alike to encircle Edward, Saruman's host, within a shrinking sphere. Faced with the combined might of Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel, Saruman felt the pressure mounting and was forced onto the defensive. His super protego, driven to full strength, shuddered under the compression of Galadriel's ring and began to falter. Then, suddenly, Saruman stopped resisting. He put the wand to his own throat and snarled, "If you don't want this body buried with me, stand down. Otherwise, I'll kill myself. Right now." That single, mad gesture froze the defenders. Galadriel's barrier stopped constricting. Gandalf and Elrond lowered their spells because it was clear Saruman truly would go through with it. Dewey's hand, still on his wand, eased by a fraction. The professors behind him relaxed but watched with cold caution. Dewey's face remained unreadable. "Saruman," he said quietly, "if you will leave Edward's body, I will let you go." "Principal," Professor Luke and the others gasped. Even Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel looked surprised. Letting Saruman walk free was like releasing a caged tiger, an enemy who hated Hogwarts and Dewey with an almost boundless malice. He would be far harder to catch later. Saruman, however, did not trust it. He laughed cruelly. "Ha! Dewey, black-robed trickster, do you think your words mean anything? The moment I relinquish this body, you'll kill me." Dewey's eyes grew cold. "If you don't trust my word, we can make a binding magical contract guaranteeing you safe passage out of Hogwarts. I will not harm you." Saruman scoffed. "A contract? Your contracts hold no weight for me." He glanced toward the corridors, where allies and enemies alike stood tense, and to the window beyond which Smaug the dragon watched, ready to breathe fire. Then he drew a small spatial pouch and poured it out. From it unfolded a traveling cabinet, the Vanishing Cabinet, its door bearing a rotating dial labeled Hogsmeade, Bree, Isengard, Rivendell, Lothlorien. Saruman set the dial to Isengard and, triumphant, told Dewey, "I should thank your portrait for showing me the dragon's treasury. It let me reclaim this very cabinet. Don't worry, if I leave unharmed, I will leave your servant untouched, so long as you don't interfere." He backed into the cabinet, shut the door, and vanished without apparent concern that they might destroy it. Dewey, Gandalf, Elrond, and the other professors stared after him, frustrated and grim. Saruman felt a smug relief as the darkness of the cabinet swallowed him, and the familiar spatial hum signaled he had reached another vanishing cabinet. Jealous of Dewey's craftsmanship, he shoved the door open, only for his face to change in an instant. A colossal head loomed down through the cabinet opening. Yellow-orange eyes the size of bowls, eyes like a reaper's, stared straight at him. "No!" Terror, fury, and disbelief contorted Saruman's face. He fumbled for his wand and tried to strike back, but the effect that swept through him was unlike a mere freezing curse. His skin toughened and grayed, his limbs stilled and became stone. Where Saruman had stood was now a statue, not Petrificus Totalus's temporary paralysis, but full petrification. The petrification came from an unexpected detail. The basilisk known as Herpo wore a pair of enormous diving goggles whose lenses were enchanted with a petrifying charm. The goggles concentrated and redirected the basilisk's deadly power. When Saruman stepped into the chamber and the goggles' gaze met his own, the enchantment took hold. From the doorway Dewey stepped in, followed by Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, and the caravan of professors. Basilisk Herpo closed its eyes and let out a low, almost contented hiss, partly a demand for praise, partly an unsettling reminder of its danger. It became obvious then that Saruman had not reached Isengard at all. The Vanishing Cabinet had led straight back into Hogwarts, into the room Herpo used as a larder. That stoop had once stored the mummified corpses of Mirkwood's giant spiders, Herpo's reserve food. 10 years later, those dried stores had long been digestive history. Having eaten the spiders, Herpo had grown vast, far larger, in fact, than the thousand-year basilisk from other tales. The trap, Dewey explained without rancor, had been set precisely for this possibility. After Galadriel sealed the castle with the ring of water and Dewey shut the fireplaces, the only remaining escape route was the Vanishing Cabinets. Dewey had secreted cabinets in the dragon's treasury under Smaug's guard, but he did not trust even that. He had modified them so that, regardless of their labeled destinations, they ultimately funneled to the one cabinet that opened into Herpo's room. It was a contingency built to stop someone like Saruman. Saruman had sensed danger, possessed Edward's body to gain entry to the castle, and stolen a cabinet with the intent of fleeing. He never suspected that his so-called escape would deliver him straight into Dewey's trap. Dewey walked over to the gray, stone figure and gently took the wand from Edward's stiff hand. Professor Luke, pale and shaken, asked, "Principal, is Professor Edward all right?" Dewey shook his head, but not with despair. "Don't worry. Edward isn't dead, just petrified. Once Saruman is expelled from his body, Ellensis can brew an antidote from Mandrake and restore him." Turning to Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel, he asked, "Saruman is still inside Edward. Do any of you know a way to drive him out?" "Let me try," Gandalf said. Dewey and the others stepped back to give him room. Gandalf pressed his staff to Edward's brow and unleashed a burst of light. "Saruman, leave this body that is not yours." His voice carried absolute authority. The power released from the staff slammed into Edward. A muffled groan escaped him, and a pale wisp of a spirit was nearly forced out. Saruman's pale soul teetered on the edge of separation, but countless ghostly threads from his lower half clung to Edward, burrowing back in and anchoring him. From inside Edward came Saruman's arrogant laugh. Gandalf, you are only the Grey, and I am Saruman the White, chief of all wizards. Do not imagine you can cast me out. Gandalf's attempt failed. Saruman had indeed been a white wizard. His strength exceeded that of most others. Only if Gandalf had followed his fated trial and been elevated by Ilúvatar, had he faced the Balrog as his ordeal, could he hope to match that power. But that Balrog was already dead. Absent some unexpected boon, Gandalf might remain Grey indefinitely. Dewey felt the weight of that failure in his chest. If Saruman remained hidden within Edward, there was little they could do. Galadriel stepped forward. Saruman's spirit is too strong. The longer he remains in Edward, the more the body will weaken under the strain. To expel him, we must not only act from the outside. Edward himself must be roused to fight. We need to restore his body and awaken his consciousness so his soul can contest Saruman's claim. Dewey frowned. Edward's soul is far weaker than Saruman's. Can he truly fight him off? Galadriel nodded. I will awaken Edward's spirit. Mithrandir and Elrond will press from without. If Edward can seize the body even for a moment, we can work together to force Saruman out. Then do it, Dewey said, and turned to the potions master. Elensis, make a batch of mandrake restorative draught at once. Elensis had heard Galadriel's plan. He saluted and hurried away. Dewey instructed the other professors to watch over the students and remained with Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel by Edward's side. Though Edward's body lay as if turned to stone, Saruman, possessing him, was not truly bound and could leave at any time. He chose not to, because once out, he would be vulnerable to attack and might be destroyed completely. So he rode the body like a hostage, refusing to come out. They held their vigil through a full day and night. Under the influence of Gandalf's ring of fire, exhaustion did not seize them. None showed fatigue. The next morning, Elensis arrived, hair greasy and eyes rimmed with weariness, clutching a vial. Headmaster, the draught is ready. Dewey inspected the potion, nodded, and patted Elensis' shoulder. You've done well. Go and rest. Normally, the mandrake restorative draught required 3 days. Elensis had worked through the night, hastening and refining the recipe to finish it in 24 hours. He protested, but his exhaustion had been held at bay by Gandalf's ring. No, sir, he said. I'd rather see Professor Edward recover with my own eyes. Dewey did not argue. He opened the vial and fed the potion into Edward's mouth. Topical remedies might help, but internal consumption worked far faster. As the mandrake took hold, the statue-like pallor of Edward's skin warmed, color returned, breath came, and a heartbeat stirred. Begin, Dewey ordered. Galadriel, prepared and solemn, bent over Edward and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. Edward, awaken. This is your body. Do not surrender. Be strong. Her kiss seemed to pour out her strength. The radiance around her dimmed, and she sagged. Lady Galadriel, Dewey and Gandalf exclaimed, and Elrond moved quickly to support her. Do not worry for me. Now, she said, weak but resolute. Edward's eyes opened. They were the familiar eyes Dewey and the others knew. My lord, he cried, looking at Dewey as if newly born. For a blessed instant his gaze was clear, then it flickered. Saruman's cold, calculating madness cut across that clarity. My lord, I can't hold on much longer, Edward gasped, fighting as if every syllable cost him. Saruman's pressure threatened to drag his consciousness under. Leave his body, Saruman. This is not yours. Gandalf's voice rolled like thunder. He struck Edward with his staff. The body did not break, but from within came the sound of a heavy, suppressed impact. More than half of Saruman's essence was forced out. Saruman, however, fought to re-enter. Elrond activated his ring of air, turning its power into invisible bonds that snared the fleeing spirit. Dewey summoned his Phoenix Patronus. The silver bird wrapped around Edward, guarding the shell against Saruman's return. The Patronus charm, a spell Dewey had mastered, was among the few magics that could affect souls. Even the killing curse could slay the living, but had no purchase on the soul. Under their combined pressure, Saruman's hold began to loosen. No, you will not do this, Saruman screamed, thrashing, unwilling to be pulled free. At that moment, a face popped out of the wall. Peeves, delighted at the commotion, shouted, Ha! Caught you, nasty ghost! Peeves will teach you a lesson. He hurtled in, seized what seemed to be Saruman's hair, and pulled up with all his might. When Dewey saw Peeves touching the spirit, hope flared. Go on, Peeves. If you can drag him out, I'll give you a private room and let you keep all your prank items there. That was all Peeves needed. A private room? Lord Peeves will try extra hard. He filled his chest, his silly body ballooned cartoonishly, and his arms swelled into exaggerated muscles. Like some ridiculous strongman, he gripped Saruman's hair and gave a mighty heave, pulling the spirit out as if uprooting a stubborn radish. Despite Saruman's furious struggles, the combined efforts of the Guardians and Peeves forced every last thread of him free from Edward. Peeves continued to pull, kicking and cursing with a running commentary as the extracted Saruman was flung off. Saruman hurled Peeves aside and tried to flee, but Dewey's Patronus intercepted him, and in an instant, Galadriel, Gandalf, and Elrond wove the power of the three elven rings together. A luminous spherical cage snapped shut around Saruman, imprisoning him. His struggles only made the light flare brighter. Dewey's face had gone cold, a killing intent shone from his eyes. "Saruman," he said softly, the words like a blade, "today is truly the day you die."